Three words to improve your business. What if it were possible to set yourself and your company apart from the majority of individuals or businesses in the world today? What if you could do that without adding anything to the demands you already have before you? If you could do it without any significant investment, no project team or master plan. In fact, if you made it happen across your organization, you would most likely find that people were less frustrated, more efficient, and productive. It's a simple strategy that could be summed up in three words. Answer your messages. Simple enough to say, perhaps because it puts few physical demands on either your company or your employees, but not so simple to do. It's hard, not because the action people must take is all that taxing, but because it involves a change in habits. It demands that you and those who work for you reset what they expect of themselves. They need to reach beyond a standard of performance that the world now seems to tolerate because, while that standard might seem normal, we should expect more of ourselves. Most of us share the common affliction of having too many voicemails, emails, texts, and messages of every kind. So much so that it seems to have spun into a new reality of business etiquette, that it's okay to overlook, delay, or even ignore messages that call for a response from us. Regardless of how valid our reasons for being inconsistent or careless in keeping up with our messages, there are other realities of business that we need to recognize. Every issue left hanging, every answer left pending, or colleague left waiting to act just adds to the gridlock in the organization. A response put off or ignored will seldom, if ever, put an end to the matter. Not responding doesn't take the pressure off for anyone. In fact, it amplifies the pressure. Neglected communication is a beast that feeds itself. Our challenges with message overload are made worse, sometimes dramatically worse, by our own failure to just deal with something at the outset. Worst of all, no response from us leaves people to fill in the blanks for themselves. The most damaging conclusion they reach is that you just don't care, or they just are not that important. Nobody can afford to imply a lack of respect on that level. Now let's be clear. This is not a lecture on how we should all just get along. We're actually arguing in the other direction. Quite apart from how you feel about courtesy or cooperation, this is an opportunity to take advantage of a weakness displayed by business in general. Where others fall down, you can distinguish yourself for an uncommon level of professionalism. Poor attitudes about responding to messages are so pervasive that those who make a habit of replying promptly stand out in a very positive way. No need to promote or advertise the fact. If you're good about it, people notice. There are individual benefits as well. It may be cynical, but still an unfortunate truth that people send out messages as a way to move an issue onto someone else's lap. If they come to learn that you are quick to respond, then you aren't going to be a very good parking lot for them, and that kind of message stops hitting your inbox altogether. We're not suggesting that you have any obligation to respond to cold calls, solicitations, or random broadcasts. But when you are the one to answer an inquiry, if you agree to provide some form of feedback, especially if you initiated the dialogue in the first place, in other words, if you owe that person a response at some time, then that sometime should be today, even if your response is only to say that you're working on it. Essentially, your inbox, voicemail, etc. should fall into two broad categories: either archive or dispose, or respond today. With that statement, many will conclude that we just aren't being realistic. Who can do that every day? In response to that, here's an observation from the trenches. Salespeople, particularly those whose products involve executive-level buying decisions, must communicate across all organizational levels and develop every degree of vendor-client relationship. They get a pretty broad sampling of how well people and organizations communicate. What they see is that in the lower rungs of an organization, there is no particular pattern in how conscientious client representatives are. But at the CEO level, the speed and quality of response is consistently excellent. The people with the easiest excuse to claim they were too busy were the ones who uniformly dealt with open questions promptly. Their answer might be yes or it might be no, but it is rarely silence. Now we can interpret this observation in several ways. Perhaps the sort of personality that rises to the top of organizations correlates with someone who is inclined to communicate. Perhaps through the course of their career, today's CEOs recognized that leaving a good impression on people mattered, and one essential part of doing that was to communicate diligently. Perhaps their communication habits didn't really figure into their rise through the ranks. Maybe they just realized that they could get more done if they didn't allow open issues to rattle around in their inbox. It might just have been a skill they adapted in order to do their job better. However you interpret it, one thing stands out. If you want to be CEO material, becoming habitually prompt and thorough in responding to your messages appears to be a good career move. Let's review the reasons for any of us to change habits and get better at getting back to people. First and foremost, this level of consideration has become uncommon, and when we rise above the norm, we look good, both as a business and as individuals. It's just straight up courtesy. Maybe not so common in recent times, but courtesy just the same, and that makes sense all on its own. Because open questions just trigger follow-up inquiries, dealing with something promptly will generally reduce the number of messages coming across our desk. If we can make it a habit of the organization, everyone becomes more efficient and working lives improve. Of course, there's more to making change happen than just buying into the idea. Here are some new habits anyone should embrace in order to be more effective at managing the flow of messages. Deal with your message queue daily. If it matters enough to stay in your inbox, then respond today. But avoid doing that review as the last thing in your day. Think of the person on the other end. They don't want things dropped on them at that time. If you work late, be aware that others can find late evening messages intrusive. Focus on advancing the issue. Contribute something toward an answer or a resolution. While it's true that your timely response reflects well on you, don't treat it as simply a way to cover yourself or bounce the issue to someone else. Be logical in who you copy. Unless someone will do their job better by hearing from you, ask yourself if they need to be copied, and don't use your distribution list as a passive way to push your issue up to higher levels. Brief messages can go straight into the subject header. The reader can see your response without opening the email itself, which can be a real convenience on a mobile device. But be careful who you do this with. It can look abrupt, even rude, unless you have established a pattern of that kind of communication. If you're leaving phone messages, understand the limitations. Unlike email or text, someone has to actively go and look for your message, which means it can be easily missed. If you leave a phone message, don't assume it has been received. Don't rattle off your callback number as fast as you can. Speak slowly. One trick is to have a pen and paper and recite the number as you are writing it down for yourself. Also, recite your phone number near the beginning and later in your message. If they must replay in order to get it right, they don't have to go through your whole message. If we convinced you to become more diligent in answering messages, well, that was the easy part. As we said at the beginning, changing behavior is the hard part. Those kinds of changes in an organization are difficult to monitor and enforce. About the only tools you have to make it happen are common sense and the eventual benefit people see in their individual working lives. You can start with your own example. When you set the standard and live by it, people have a better insight into what to expect of themselves. But do set the standard. Explain to your organization what you want to achieve and why. Help them anticipate what they can expect among themselves and let them feel a sense of duty to their colleagues. For the most part, people don't actively attempt to be inconsiderate. Let them know that whatever might be normal in the broader world of mobile communication, keeping silent in the business world is a poor reflection on the individual. Providing prompt and helpful responses is a sure way to set your company apart and make a strong statement of professionalism. We wish you every success in making that happen. If you agree that there are many more benefits when you run a more professional operation, look into the Construction Business Basics programs outlined on this website, or get in touch to talk about it. After all, good things happen when we communicate.